One of my favorite things to say is that everybody has a story. You just have to find how you want to spin it and how you want to tell that story. And then I listen to not just what they say, but you have to listen to how they say it, because I truly like and enjoy telling the stories of our students and helping people feel connected. I think that's why I like telling stories. I like to connect people. I like to show that Sally is a mom of 2 children and was able to go back to school, and if she can do it, why can't you? So that's one of my favorite reasons to tell stories of our students, is because everybody is different. You have one person who went to culinary school and is now working in city council. You have a mom who started school when she was right out of college, but it just wasn't the right time for her personally. And so now 2 decades later, she goes back and finishes her degree with her daughters cheering her on and crying with her when she graduates and finally crosses that stage. It's finding the stories to be able to tell. It's a lot of fun. What the students say determines the flow of the story. We talked a lot about pain point, and I get chills every time I talk about this story.
Today, we're welcoming to the show Cari Gold. Cari, please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks so much for having me. I am the Marketing and Communications Coordinator for UTSA Online. And so what that entails is primarily content creation. On a day-to-day basis, I do a lot of email writing to our students, responding to emails from coworkers and colleagues, social media, blog writing, any other type of articles that need to go on our website, press release type things, and editing the website in general.
I know we have a lot of aspiring content creators in our audience. Do you have advice for those that are just getting started with content creation, and especially for those who want to create professionally for an organization like you're doing?
I will say I was not actually trained in content creation. My background is actually in business. And so a lot of my writing style I learned in business and in reading. I consume a lot of content. I actually have to be careful how much content I consume, because in this day and age, the content can be kind of overwhelming and sometimes it can be a little depressing. So you have to be really careful about what kind of content you consume. But for example, I worked in college athletics for the first 10 years of my career. And in college athletics, I consumed a lot of content from other colleges and universities in athletics. And I looked at what they were doing, how we could adapt that to what we were doing. You never want to copy somebody exactly, but looking at what other people are doing, seeing how can that be tweaked to fit my brand, to fit my mold. That's what you want to do. That's my biggest advice, is consume content, but take it with a grain of salt and see how you can adapt it to be your own.
Whenever you're trying to get the process kicked off for UT San Antonio, what are you thinking about first? And what does the start of that content creation process look like?
Yeah, that's a great question. So honestly, it kind of depends a lot on what specifically I am working on. So we'll take emails, for example. Emails a lot of time are being requested by either our enrollment counselors or our academic advisors. And so they're giving me kind of a basis for starting. They'll say, hey, we need an email that's going to go to students. It's about this topic, and these are the key things that we want to include in there. Sometimes they'll send me a draft email and I'll take that and tweak it. Sometimes I'll completely rewrite it depending on tone of voice and things like that. But that's usually how I get started with emails. If it's a blog post, we actually work with a marketing partner who gives us an outline, and I take that. And honestly, I pop it into an artificial intelligence program. I say, hey, I'm extremely specific with what I try to be extremely specific with what my prompt is. Hey, you're a marketing manager. You're working on this blog. This is how long you need it to be. This is the tone of voice you need it to have. Please make sure you're addressing people as you in the content instead of saying students. So that's usually how I start. But if you look at the version that AI gives and the version that I supply to my boss, they're completely different. I use AI as a jumping off point, and then I take that research that the AI has done, again, going back to tone of voice, putting it in your own words, putting your own spin on it, making sure it aligns with your brand. Because AI takes the process for a blog from probably 5 or 6 hours down to maybe 1 or 2 hours. So it saves a ton of time, because I'm not an expert in everything that I'm writing about, but AI is able to help me do that research and figure out some of those key statistics, or even give me an idea of, this is a key statistic you want to include. And so then I can go and do that research on my own, and I'll start to Google. For example, I'm working on a blog post right now. how important is AI in the workforce right now? And so I'll Google that and I'll find statistics. And then that's something that I can then go and include in the blog.
And that kind of credibility, I'm sure, is incredibly important, especially working for a university like organization where you have to get it right. Whenever you're writing the email or writing the blog, how close do you have to pay attention to those initial messaging points that you had in mind from either your organization or from your own research?
It's crucial to keep those in mind because if you get too off topic, our target audience at UTSA Online is typically working adults, adults with families. They're extremely busy, like a lot of us. And so if I write an email and I get off topic, then they're not going to read it. I want my emails to be straight to the point, short and sweet, and to give them the information that they need in the shortest amount of time possible while still explaining and making sure that they fully understand what I'm trying to convey.
In working with subject matter experts and working with students, I'm sure you've seen incredibly successful media interviews and maybe some that didn't work out. Do you have anything to share around that theme of interviews?
Well, this was probably my first or second year in San Antonio, and we had one media person. I don't remember the person, I don't remember the outlet, I just remember the story itself. The person did the interview, and the interview went well. They were one of several media members at the football practice that day, but it was a hot day. It was 95 degrees. I think it was August in the summer in San Antonio. And so it was hot. The sun was up mid-morning, probably like 10 o'clock, and the person was supposed to be doing her stand-up next. And so she went into the bathroom and got her makeup all situated and came out. She was trying to include too many statistics, too many numbers into the interview. And so what should have been the interview was already completed. So the stand up was supposed to be probably 20 to 30 seconds worth of talking. And from what I remember, it took her 30 to 40 minutes. Her makeup all was sweating off and it was just, she was trying to do too much when she should have kept it short and sweet. And so make sure that, especially if you're doing something where you're not able to read the statistics, make sure you keep things short and sweet and don't try to overdo it because people aren't going to necessarily know that you had all of those other statistics. You can always throw them up on the screen, but if you're trying to fumble through it, then it might look a little funny.
So brevity is great advice for all kinds of communication tasks. I think this is a great story that illustrates that.
We talked about that with emails where people don't have time to read a super long email. So you want to be short, sweet, and to the point.
What are some of the motivations of your persona, your ideal audience avatar? What is it that moves them to take action and actually sign up for a program from either UTSA Online or some of the other UTSA programs?
Yeah, that's a great question. Our persona varies a little bit from the traditional student. Our students are working adults, their families. I'd love to give an example. So we recently interviewed an amazing woman named Sally. I'm sure you've seen some of her content. You guys can all go and look at it on UTSA Online on YouTube. Her motivation was her two daughters, and one of them had already finished college, and she had always wanted to get a degree and decided that now was the time to go back and get her degree before her youngest daughter finished college. But her pain point, we talked a lot about pain point, and I get chills every time I talk about this story. Her pain point was that she was doing the same work as all of her coworkers, and she had a lower job title and a lower pay because she did not have the degree. I have friends who I know whose parents were not able to get a promotion because they didn't have the degree. So that's kind of our target audience is people who are looking to either advance in their career or start their careers. Some people want to change careers, but it's usually career focused or family focused. A mom who wants to get a degree so that she can show her young children that getting a degree is possible, but she's also working full time or taking care of her family full time. And so she doesn't have time to drive to campus, find parking, spend an hour or 2 hours 3 times a week to take one class. She would much rather have the flexibility that we provide to sit at home and have her children do their homework while she's sitting next to them doing their homework. And so our target audience is really pretty different from UTSA Online. We're not really going after the same students. We're simply providing students who would not be able to attend UTSA in person an opportunity to earn a UTSA degree with the flexibility that they need for their busy lives.
Tell me more about this student success story because I imagine you're looking for students, but do they need to be coached? How does that process look whenever you're trying to celebrate students as a part of your marketing and communication plan?
My process typically is we'll either work with the faculty members or a lot of times we'll work with our academic advisors to identify somebody. Sally was a little bit different. Sally, we had a list of names, and when we got to commencement, I said, "Is anybody named Sally Barnes?" And Sally happened to be 2 feet in front of me. So it really was kind of fate to work with Sally. We pulled her aside, we interviewed her, and she was a communications major. I believe she took several of your classes, and she just right off the bat was phenomenal. It got emotional, but held it in check while she was answering the question. It tends to get a little bit longer so that we can get several videos out of it. With some students, we have to do minimal coaching. We ask her a question and then we say, "Hey, remember when you were talking about this when we were just chatting over there? Bring that emotion into it so that we can kind of draw that emotion out." Some students need a little more coaching, and that's completely okay too. And some students we talk to and we say, "You know what? We love your story. You have a phenomenal story. We're going to write an article about it." Because they may not be as comfortable in front of the camera, and they may come to us and say, "I'd love to do a story, but I really don't want to be on camera. Is there any way we can do something else?" We also have students that have phenomenal stories who don't live close enough for us to interview them in person. We had one student, I'm going to be writing a story on him sometime in the near future, but I interviewed him recently. His background, I think he went to culinary school and then decided that he wanted to get his degree, and so attended UTSA online while working for the city of San Antonio. Right after graduation, he decided that he wanted to live in Washington State. And so he moved to Tacoma. And now he's working in a city council office up in that part of the country. And so, but he was able to work full time while earning his degree, again, because we provided that flexibility that he needed to be able to accomplish his dreams.
I love interviewing our students too. I'm usually doing it as, hey, what can we improve about this class or what did you like about this class kind of angle. When you're architecting a story and you're thinking about what to put first in the middle and the end, what's in your mind and what does it look like to go from interview to blog or interview to actual fully produced online video showcasing the power of UTSA Online?
My first time writing a feature story, I was looking for a formula. I had learned how to write a press release and had written several press releases, and they gave me kind of a formula to follow. You want to start with this, and then you want to include this, and then you want to include this. So I went into the feature story and I asked my supervisor, I said, this was 15 years ago at this point. I said, "What's the process of writing a feature story?" And they said, "There isn't one." My brain is very step by step. I like things in lists. I like things in to-do lists. And so I said, "Okay." And my first story, I remember vividly, my family was in town visiting. I wrote the story and then I cut out each paragraph in strips and I was rearranging them and trying to figure out how the story was going to flow best. Now that I'm a little more experienced, what the students say determines the flow of the story. It determines what we want to convey to students. We go on with a general knowledge. For example, with Sally, we really wanted to touch on that pain point of I wasn't making as much money as people who were doing the same job as me. But we also wanted to touch on she talked about how she would not have gotten through her degree without her family. And so we were able to break up her story into a couple of different shorter stories for YouTube and for social media. And so we really let her story dictate where it was going to go. Because again, like my supervisor back when I was in grad school told me, there's really no formula, unfortunately, but also fortunately for writing a feature story, writing a blog, covering someone's story, because one of my favorite things to say is that everybody has a story. You just have to find how you want to spin it and how you want to tell that story. So that's one of my favorite reasons to tell stories of our students is because everybody is different. You have one person who went to culinary school and is now working in city council. You have a mom who started school when she was right out of college, but it just wasn't the right time for her personally. And so now 2 decades later, she goes back and finishes her degree with her daughters cheering her on and crying with her when she graduates and finally crosses that stage. It's finding the stories to be able to tell. It's a lot of fun.
We have a lot of students who love to work behind the scenes, who love to write the blog instead of appearing on camera. They're very camera shy in many cases. What advice do you give people who might be camera shy, but also want to get on camera and actually tell their story in front of the camera? Because I know you're working with not just subject matter expert faculty, but you're also working with students and people who may be less comfortable in front of the camera.
I am one of those people who is typically less comfortable in front of the camera. This is stepping outside of my comfort zone a little bit to do this podcast. But everything that I've seen from other people on YouTube who talk about this type of thing, like I said, I consume a lot of content. And so everything that I've seen is that you just have to step out there and do it. Your first podcast, your first YouTube video is probably going to be bad. It's probably going to be cringy. You're going to look back 2 years from now and say, just like I look back 10 years ago or even 2 years ago and I say, I wrote that. But as with writing, the more you do it, the better you're going to get. You just have to do it. You just have to start. You also have to know, especially if you're going to be on YouTube, you're probably not going to have a whole lot of people watching you in the beginning. So you can take that time to figure out how to be comfortable on camera and to practice. And the more you do it, the more comfortable you'll get, so that by the time people are watching you, you feel like, okay, now I'm ready for people to see me. And then you can look back on those cringy videos from the beginning and kind of laugh a little bit at yourself.
I like that journey because that's how we grow, right? We put ourselves out there. I know that you're not doing specific media relations, media pitch work, but what you're doing is speaking to the media too, because you're speaking to the publics. In your communication design, in the workflow that you use, can you walk us through your research, your planning, your implementation, your evaluation process as you work on your communication design efforts?
It's funny that you mentioned working with the media because when I was in athletics, that was my job, was a lot of working with the media. So I'm going to try to remember all of the steps that you suggested, and I'll actually walk you through. So I was still working in athletics when COVID hit back in 2019 or 2020. And so one of the things that I did was I was able to get, I think it was something like 20 media stories in the span of like a month or two for the school that I was working at the time. But I was able to identify the students. Here I work with academic advising and I say, okay, we're looking for anybody who has an amazing story, a military member who has been in the military and so they're not able to attend classes in person because they don't know if they're going to be in America or if they're going to be in Germany or if they're going to be halfway around they really don't know because they can't predict what's going to happen in 6 months to a year from now. I talk to the academic advisors and get their thoughts. When I was working in athletics, and if you have this opportunity, I talked to the people themselves. I found an incredible story. We had a football player who wanted to be a pediatric orthopedic surgeon. I found this out because we were at a football media day and I was having dinner and I sat with our student athletes. There were 2 of them. I sat with them and I asked them, what's your major? What do you want to do with that? And he said, I forget his specific major, but he said, oh, I want to be a pediatric orthopedic surgeon. And I said, that's extremely lofty. I love that. His goal was to, when he graduated from college, join the military and use that to pay for medical school because both his parents were in the military. As soon as I heard that, I said, I love it. This is great. We need to get this out there. And so I started texting my media contacts who had been covering the university that I was working at for many years. And I said, hey, I have this amazing story. They came out to cover practices sometimes. And since this was the beginning of the season, when I saw them, I said, hey, I got a story for you. And I shared that story. And I think three or four of the media people that I talked to all said, I love it. Let's set it up. And that's the same thing that I did when COVID hit. I actually sent out a survey. One of the questions in that survey was, what is one challenge, or can you share any challenges that you've had since starting college and how you overcame them. And one of the softball players said basically the city got destroyed by Hurricane Harvey. And so we were able to do a story with her on how she worked with her family to overcome that and to recover from that. And her grandmother's house, I think, was destroyed, but her family's house was okay. And so there was a lot of things that happened, and how she emotionally and mentally and they were physically able to overcome some of those challenges. So that's one of my favorite questions to ask is, what challenges have you experienced and how have you overcome those? Because that's the hero arc, right?
What are some of the other questions that you like in your research survey phase and the interview kind of questions that you might be doing live on the spot with that subject matter expert or that student?
Hey, that's a great question. We have a couple of kind of generic questions that we ask to all students. So why UTSA online? That usually will get to the kind of the general pain point that we're looking to go more deeply into. So we start with why UTSA online. We start with why did you choose your major? That's kind of the biggest one. And then the challenges one. What challenges have you overcome? Who was your inspiration? I love to ask that. One of my favorite questions, Ryan, what kind of legacy do you want to leave? That one usually students have to say. I ask that one a lot at commencement. What kind of legacy, especially when I was in person, but it works for online students as well. What kind of legacy do you hope to have left now that you're graduating? Because you've been able to leave your mark on your teachers, on your classmates these past 4 years. How do you want people to remember you? That one always gets people to kind of sit and think, what kind of legacy do I want to leave? So I think that one is something that we all probably need to think about a little bit more. What kind of legacy do we want to leave?
Have to ask, I know we will continue the research, planning, implementation, and evaluation process here in a moment, but I have to ask, what kind of legacy would you like to leave with
I had
UTSA
a
Online?
I had a feeling that you were going to ask that. I want to leave a legacy of hard work and of caring, not just for our students, but for everybody that I work with, whether it's my boss or the enrollment counselors or the academic advisors or our faculty members. I want people to remember that I care and that I'm not doing this just because it's something to do. I'm doing this because I truly like and enjoy telling the stories of our students and helping people feel connected. I think that's why I like telling stories. I like to connect people. I like to show that Sally is a mom of 2 children and was able to go back to school. And if she can do it, why can't you?
Wonderful answer. So, in the research process, we've discussed AI, we've discussed survey development. How big are your surveys? Are they 10 questions? Are they 15?
I have a list of questions, about I think it's like 10, that I ask at commencement. I don't usually go into all of those because usually we have just a couple of minutes per person and we're trying to get several different people through at once. For the longer feature stories that we write, we usually go in with about 20 questions and they're never the same. Sally's questions are going to be completely different from Shalita. We did a feature story this was before I got here. Out East was able to do a feature story on Shalita, our first facility management graduate. And so those 2 questions are going to be completely different. You'll have some crossovers. You'll have why UTSA online, what was your pain point, and what kind of legacy. You'll a lot of times have some of those similar questions, but because everybody's story is so different. I mean, Sally lives in Kerrville and has 2 adult daughters and works full-time in communications. And Shalita is a boss who's constantly rising in the field and works in facility management. So both amazing stories, both incredible women, but you do have to tailor your questions to the person, because if you ask the same questions, you're going to get the same story every single time. And that gets boring to tell after a while.
And no matter what you're looking for, you're usually looking for transformation or change. And that, how do we go from where we are to where we want to be? How do we cross that gap? In the research process, I'd imagine you have a lot of curiosity and you're trying to fulfill that curiosity for your ideal target audience as well. What are some of the things that drive you in the research that you're always coming back to? You've mentioned change, you've mentioned transformation, you've mentioned the differences in the questions, but what are some of the go-to questions beyond pain points, beyond those obvious ones?
Our process for UTSA Online is that we start every feature story, every major feature story that we work on. This is whether it's with faculty members or with students. We do what we call a pre-interview. So this is a Teams meeting where we basically interview the students and we ask them about their background. We ask them, did you go to school right after college? And if so, how did that work out for you? And we ask them some of those more general questions. We talk to them about their families and things like that so that we can get to the heart of those pain point topics. So we don't usually know where the interview is going to go until we do that pre-interview.
And in the planning process, what does that look like? After you've done your research, the next step is usually planning of some sort. Tell us about your planning process.
Yeah, this is actually something, especially with the video team, that I had a meeting about this the other day, how much our process has evolved just since I've been here. Now that I'm here and we have me and my boss working on these feature stories, I'm really able to dedicate a lot of time to the pre-planning process. So usually what it looks like is I come up with a set of questions. They're usually fairly generic, tailored a little bit to some of the things that we already know about the student for the pre-interview. Once we do the pre-interview, I go through and I rewatch the interview. I take notes during the interview, figure out kind of some of the highlights that we really want to hit on. And then we tailor our questions to that, to what that student said in the pre-interview. After we do that, I send those to my boss, I send those to the video team, and we communicate with our AVP to see, is there anything else that maybe I missed that I didn't think about? And so we collaborate as a team. And then I think we're probably going to get into this a little bit, but during the actual video interview process, my boss does the actual interview. And I sit to the side and I take notes of what they're saying, what file name it is. So it's usually like C6782, C6783. And so I keep track of where we are. And then I take notes on what they're saying. You probably remember this when we interviewed you and Chad and Pedro a couple of months ago. Talked about media psychology, storytelling, went into this, went into that. And that way we have a spreadsheet so that when we're going back and when I'm writing the script for the video that I want, I can look and it doesn't take me forever to figure out what I want. That way everything is organized. When we did another video with some faculty members back in the summer, I didn't have the spreadsheet as clearly situated. So it was taking me hours to rewatch all the videos, take notes in the Dropbox file, say, cut here, start here, I love how she says this, but can we cut this part out? So now that I have a full spreadsheet, I go into the spreadsheet, then I go into the Dropbox file and I have both of them open on two separate screens. And then I listen to not just what they say, but you have to listen to how they say it, because they can say the same thing in one clip and they sound like they're talking like this. And then you listen to the next clip where we've coached them up a little bit and said, hey, can you remember that passion? And then she's talking about how she felt like a different person. And so that's the kind of thing, we don't just want to look at what they're saying, but we want to look at how they're saying it when we're doing videos. When you're reading, it doesn't really matter as much because you can kind of frame the question and frame the content so that it sounds like they're excited. But you can't really do that with video. So you really have to make sure that you're getting the content that you're then going to be able to use.
Is there anything else in the planning process that you think that our audience should know before we move on to implementation?
I think a lot of it is just making sure that you're tailoring your content to your brand, but also to your subject. And so it really kind of depends. If you're talking yourself, then you want to make sure that you have the right tone of voice for your audience. But if you're interviewing somebody, you want to make sure that they have the right tone of voice for what you are trying to convey to your audience. We talked about this in the when we interviewed you and Chad and Pedro. Again, it all goes back to audience and making sure that you are doing what you can to reach your audience. because you're probably going to speak differently if you're trying to reach Gen Z than if you're trying to reach Gen X or millennials.
We've done research, we've done planning, and now we're ready to go into implementation. The videos are published. What happens there?
Yeah, so this will look a little bit different depending on the size of your audience. So UTSA Online, we have just more recently, really within the past year, started ramping up our video production. And so at this point, I'm still reaching out to people saying, hey, can you go and interact with this? Because the more interaction you get, the more the algorithm says, hey, this is good content. Let's share it with people. But you also want to be careful. For me, I try to be really careful about what platforms we're putting things on. For example, we did a video on cybersecurity last semester, and we ended up with, it was something like 30% engagement rate on the video, 27 to 30% engagement rate with, I can't remember the exact statistics, but that was the engagement rate, which was incredible for us. Ran, you would know better, potentially better than I do. 30% engagement rate on LinkedIn is pretty phenomenal. So anytime you can get that engagement rate up, that's kind of what we're looking for. You can get likes and interactions, but really you want people commenting on your videos and sharing your videos, because I think those are the things that right now a platform like Instagram is looking for. That could change because Instagram is constantly changing, but as of the filming of this video, that's what they're looking for.
What are some of these other common platforms looking for, and how do you leverage your expertise to get that kind of engagement on these other social media platforms?
It all goes back to tone of voice. On LinkedIn, we really try to have a more professional tone of voice. There are some things that we'll post some silly, I like to call them silly posts that are more like, it's National Dog Day. I don't post those on LinkedIn because I've posted those on LinkedIn in the past, and they show that they don't perform well on there because it is a professional platform. So we try to tailor our content to each platform. On Facebook is a lot of older adults. It's not necessarily where Gen Z is hanging out right now. And so we kind of keep that in mind with what we're posting, but also with the tone of voice that we're using. So we try to use younger language that younger millennials and Gen Z would be a little bit more interested in. On LinkedIn, I do try to be more professional. And so I'll say, let's see, for this AI post, I could say, have you ever been interested in working with AI, but you're really not sure where to start? Don't worry, we've got your back. So that's something that I would say on LinkedIn. Whereas on Instagram, I would probably say something more along the lines of, AI can really help you with your career. If you're not sure how, we've got you covered. Something along those lines. I'm a lot better when I can sit down and write it out and look at it and read it. A lot of times we'll use AI to help myself generate some of those initial jumping off points for the content, for the written content on the platform. It always goes back to making sure that your tone of voice is right for your audience on that specific platform.
Earlier, you mentioned engagement specifically, and this whole idea of helping to drive traffic to those messages. You have any tips for our starting out communicators who are trying to boost their own content in the same way?
Yes, actually, one of my biggest tips is to think about your target audience and then find other people on that platform that your target audience is likely to also be following. So for us, for UTSA Online, maybe we'll follow the zoo because that's a platform where parents with young children might be following to see the cute animals. So find those platforms and then engage with those. So we engage a lot with UTSA, a lot of the UTSA channels on Instagram, and then we ask them to do the same. And so when you engage with other people, you can then ask them to engage with your content if you want to, or hope that they understand like, oh, this person has a similar target audience. A rising tide lifts all boats. And so by you engaging with other people and having other people engage with you, it helps both of you.
Are there any other tips that you have specific to social media? Because I know a lot of our students are studying digital communication.
I do a lot of watching things on YouTube. So all of the Instagram, when I mentioned, oh, Instagram is looking for this right now, I find all of that stuff on YouTube. So I do a lot of watching YouTube to figure out different things that are trending right now, or different things that are, for example, let's say you're a hair and makeup YouTube channel. And so you could start typing in the search bar, hairstyles for and see what pops up. And then you look and say, my target audience would love hairstyles for 90s babies. And then you do a video on that. I do a lot of research into what's going on Instagram, what's going on Facebook, what's going on LinkedIn, and then different creative ways to be able to use artificial intelligence and reach that target audience.
Could you rank your most effective platforms for UTSA online right now? So the University of Texas at San Antonio focuses more on, is it LinkedIn? Is it YouTube? Is it Facebook? Is it Instagram? What is it?
I initially was just kind of focusing on everything. And I quickly realized that our best performing platforms from an engagement perspective were LinkedIn and Instagram. And so I still post to Facebook on a fairly regular basis. We still post to Twitter, or X as it's now called. But my focus and my priority is Instagram and LinkedIn because that's where our audience is and that's where our engagement is.
And you didn't mention TikTok.
We are not on TikTok. Ren, I believe TikTok is actually banned for Texas government entities in Texas, which UTSA, as part of the UT system, I believe falls under that. So we actually have never had a TikTok, to my knowledge, at UTSA online. It also, to me, because we did discuss it back before everything happened with a potential TikTok ban. And for us at the time, and I think this is still kind of our philosophy, we don't want to overextend ourselves. And so right now, with everything, there are only two of us in UTSA online marketing at this point. We partner with a video crew who works for the university, but they don't report directly under the same line as we do. So they also work with other departments. So they're extremely busy as well. And so right now, our bandwidth is pretty much at capacity with focusing on X, reposting to X and Facebook, and then focusing on Instagram and LinkedIn. And so it really goes back to finding where our target audience is and then not overextending ourselves to different platforms that are not necessary at the moment.
We currently have to teach about TikTok because it's an important part of the media landscape. But yes, the department does not maintain or post anything as per our laws in Texas specifically and our guidance from our cybersecurity professionals. So that's research, planning, implementation. What about evaluation? You mentioned metrics earlier and you talked about a 30% boost. Can you tell some of the other success stories and what those posts and what those engagement numbers look like?
Yeah, off the top of my head, I don't remember overall numbers right now, but I can talk about a couple of specific examples. We started using trending audio a little over a year ago. The first time, I was actually looking at it last night with my boss. The first time we used trending audio, it was a short, literally like 5 to 6 second clip of one of our graduates holding up a sign that says, I'm a UTSA online or a UTSA graduate. And I put it to some trending audio. And within maybe 12 hours, it got 1,500 views, which was way more than any that we had ever gotten on that platform in such a short amount of time. And so I started using trending audio on a regular basis. Another thing that we did was Sally, we actually collaborated with her and we saw a big boost in engagement, a couple thousand views. It basically was more engagement than most of our other posts had gotten because we were using a collaboration, partnering with somebody who had not only a decent following, but decent engagement from that following already.
I love that collaboration strategy because I know that in some circles, people are hesitant to follow or engage with organizations, and they're much more likely to follow and engage with the human. So partnering with the real humans that are being really successful from UTSA Online seems like a really powerful strategy. In your evaluation work, have you found other powerful strategies that might help our content creation audience?
I did a presentation back in November where I told them ahead of time, you're going to see a lot of themes in this because a lot of communication goes back to some of these key central points: tone of voice, making sure that you're putting the right things on the right platforms and not just throwing everything up on every platform, hoping that something sticks. Doing research to see. Sometimes your research is you post a video and you see how it performs. I will say though that sometimes you don't know. You can spend hours working on something and you get very low engagement on it. Whereas you spend like 10 minutes and you're like, oh, this is cute. And you throw it up and then it all of a sudden blows up and you have a million views and it goes viral. And so you never really know what's going to hit on the internet. And I think that's just kind of the nature of it. But making sure that your tone of voice is targeting your target person, your target audience, and making sure that you're posting the right things to the right platforms are two big keys that I would say you really want to make sure you understand.
It sounds like you had some surprises. I want to hear about those. What did you do that surprised you? Because you say, I put something there, and I didn't expect it to do well, and then it did well. Tell us those stories.
I think the biggest one is, and so some of those stories, I will admit, some of those stories come from watching YouTube because I follow a person on YouTube and she talked about how she made this video a while ago and she just threw it up like a week ago because she needed some content. It was a silly little cute kind of video, and all of a sudden she had 1.2 million views on it, which is phenomenal. For us, I think the biggest one was the first time I used trending audio with that commencement one. I think I used it right before a commencement, but it was about a student who had graduated the past semester, and 1,500 views in, again, just a few hours was a lot more. I was sitting there refreshing. I was like, oh my goodness. Oh, I looked at it an hour after and we had 600 views already. I think sometimes you can see people have watched this for an average of 2 seconds or whatever, but the average watch time was still pretty good. It was, again, only a 6 to 7 second clip, but is the biggest one that sticks in my mind as where I posted it thinking we need some graduation content. It's about to be graduation. And then all of a sudden we had a lot of views on it. And I said, let's make sure we use trending audio. Let's make sure we have good quality pictures or videos and a good caption, that kind of a thing.
So that's the success. We can learn just as much, if not more, from failures. Can you walk us through what those failures looked like and what you got from them?
I wouldn't say failures. I would say learning experiences, because to me, failure, and I think to everybody or most people, failure has such a negative connotation. But especially when you're first starting out, don't look at anything as a failure. You really want to make sure you're looking at it as a learning opportunity. I really wanted to introduce our audience to some of our team members. And so I worked really hard on some graphics and asked them a couple of questions. And we got very little engagement on that specific series that I did. I think it probably had more to do with the fact that I was posting a graphic on Instagram, and Instagram doesn't really like graphics. And so we learned from that and we said, okay, next time if we do this, we'll probably do a short little video with those employees who are comfortable doing videos. If they're not comfortable with it, I never want to force anybody to do something on social media that they're not comfortable with. And so some of them did opt out, and we said that's completely fine. But I think that's one of the first learning stories that I have from UTSA Online, where we tried something and we realized graphics don't necessarily do so well because we weren't getting that engagement. Another thing I learned from that is to feel free to ask for engagement. And so we have a group of communicators that we meet with about once a week. And so when I post some of the bigger stories that we post, blogs, feature story videos, that kind of a thing, I share all of the links with that team and I say, hey, any engagement would be appreciated. That way, once they engage with it, it tells the algorithm that it's important content that other people will want to see it, and then it will start promoting that content a little bit more.
That seems like a really strong strategy. From your old athletic days when you were working with media relations and public relations more, do you have any skills that translated beautifully to UTSA Online? And if you could break those down for our audience so that they know what kind of skills might fit regardless of the path of professional communication that you want to take.
Yeah, we talk sometimes about soft skills, about being able to work with people, about being able to communicate well. At one point, I was the communications person for an FBS football program where I had to be able to communicate and manage interviews and things like that for a coaching staff where I think there were 10 coaches on the coaching staff. There were 100 players on the team. And so I had to be able to get to know them so that I could promote their stories to the media. But then I also had to build relationships with the media because I've sent stories to media before. Even if it's a good story, if I don't have that relationship, they might not even look at it. Sometimes they will. Sometimes all it takes is a good story. But a lot of times it's building those relationships. You also have to build the relationships to be able to find out the stories, because with Sally, I was able to build that relationship with her, and we were able to draw out some of that passion because we had met and we had a little bit of a rapport. I also have to be able to have the relationships with the academic advisors so that they know that I'm on board, that we all have the same goal. We all want our students to succeed, and we want to get more students in who know that they can succeed with UTSA Online. Being able to communicate is a huge thing. It seems obvious, right? You're in a communications field, but I have worked with communicators in the past who don't communicate so well, and it really can cause issues for the whole organization if the people who are in charge of external communications can't also communicate with their colleagues.
You mentioned building relationships and the importance of building relationship with media professionals. I know our audience is thinking, how do I do that? Because when they first get hired on, they probably have very little, if any, media relations.
When I first got to San Antonio and was working in athletics, I reached out to the media and said, "Hey, my name is Cari Gold. Here's my job title. I'm new to the university. I would love to meet with you." And so I think it was the editor of the newspaper, but we went and we had lunch and we just sat down and we got to know each other a little bit. The other media members, they were all coming out to cover the football program anyways. I went out and I stood with them and I just chatted and I asked about their background and if they had always lived in San Antonio and how they got to where they are. I'm very introverted, and so a lot of times I don't really like small talk, but being able to, again, going back to being able to communicate, being able to build relationships, those soft skills, whether you're introverted or not, you really need to be building those soft skills so that you can succeed in your career.
I think soft skills are definitely something that is important. If you were to leave our audience with one piece of advice, one kernel of wisdom that they would remember after listening, what would that be?
Consume content that is going to help your audience grow and focus on your specific audience. That's going to encompass all of the things that we talked about, from tone of voice to building relationships to interacting with other content. But you really need to focus on your specific audience, because if you're trying to talk to everybody, you're going to be talking to nobody.
And do you have specific advice on how to do that? The research obviously is key. The creating of an avatar or persona is key. What are the other things that people might get wrong in focusing on an audience?
The biggest thing for me, because I've done this a lot in my own life in the past year, is thinking about how you're going to be able to connect with them. For example, me, I don't have any kids. And so if my target audience was a mom of young kids, I don't have a lot in common with her right now because I don't have any young kids. And so my days are really my own. If I wake up and I want to not get out of bed for an hour after wake up, I can do that. My sister, on the other hand, is a mom of 3 kids. I think my nephew is 5 and under. He's about to be 6, but 5 and under. When she wakes up, she doesn't have the luxury of just laying in bed for an hour unless the kids are still asleep. So you really want to kind of think about things in your own life that can help you figure out how you're going to be able to connect with that target audience, and make sure that you're picking somebody. A lot of the times, your target audience is going to be a version of yourself, whether that's a past version of yourself, how you are currently, or a version of yourself that you hope to be. If you hope that you're going to be somebody who wakes up at 6 a.m. and works out every day, and that's your target audience, you're going to have to start waking up at 6 a.m. to work out every day so that you can connect with that target audience.
I'm imagining you writing a blog with this target audience in mind. What are the other things in your head as you write this blog with this target audience? Because I imagine SEO is important too, right?
Absolutely. We actually partner with a marketing agency, and they give us an outline and they give us SEO tips. And so you want to focus on SEO, yes, but you don't want to, they call it keyword stuffing. You don't want to keyword stuff. You don't want to just throw in, I've looked at blogs before where it says how, for example, I worked on a blog, how to balance work and school. So you don't want to, that's our long phrase keyword, but we don't want to put how to balance work and school 15 times sprinkled throughout unless it actually fits. We don't want to try to force it in there. So what I did instead is I added in balance work and school or balance school and work just to kind of make sure that we were reaching our target audience without making the SEO platforms upset.
And you mentioned that you work with a marketing agency. What's the most interesting things that you learned in that relationship? Because I know having only two people working all of University of Texas at San Antonio online, that sounds like a really big job. So I'm sure that they have given tips, tricks, and insights that have helped move your work forward.
They're the ones that come up with the outlines. They really do a lot of work in helping us come up with keywords. And they're kind of who I learned. Make sure you don't keyword stuff. Make sure that you're sprinkling these throughout. Make sure that when you're writing a blog, that you're doing research to figure out if that blog is going to resonate with your target audience. Because I could pick to write a blog, and this is why we haven't written a blog about AI yet, because we were still trying to figure out, okay, what's the best way to relate that to our audience? And there's actually an AI essentials course that UTSA has. And so I was able to talk to the student who was the creator of that course, the kind of jumping off point for that course. And so now we're able to relate that to our target audience. But if you can't relate what you're writing about to your target audience, again, it's going to fall flat. My biggest thing is, again, it goes back to building relationships. You meet people and you talk to people, and then you find out that they happen to be in your target audience and they happen to have this thing that would really align with you. But you want to be really careful about going into a relationship for the sole purpose of trying to benefit your brand or benefit your audience. You really want to have authentic relationships. I've seen people who, I call it, they're like a used car salesman. You see that sometimes in like a development type office where you feel like they're trying to get you to donate, whether it's time or money or whatever. You feel like they're trying to get you to give something without being willing to give anything in return. And you don't want to be that person.
You want to help people win. And that's what you're doing here at University of Texas at San Antonio online. You're helping people win. You're helping students win. You're helping our faculty get their message out to people. And you're helping spread the word of the good work of social mobility. Thanks to UT San Antonio. If you could leave our audience with a message from UT San Antonio, what would be the takeaway?
Getting the degree can sometimes be more important than what you get the degree in. For our target audience, that would be my message for our target audience. But for students who are looking to get into communications, I would say build those relationships. Again, it all goes back to building relationships. And we've had a lot of themes in this podcast. We've had tone of voice, we've had communication, finding your audience, but finding your audience and building those relationships. You're not just building relationships with the people that you want to help you. You're building a relationship with your audience. Even if it's just through Instagram, the people that I follow, I will message and say, hey, I loved your content. I had a quick question about it. And that's something that we're all here to do, is build those relationships.
Beautiful. If people want to find you online because they might need some extra advice or they might be able to help you with promoting UT San Antonio online, where can they find you?
I'm really primarily on LinkedIn. I have a Twitter and X account. I'm not very active on there. I basically have it just to make sure that I can kind of stay up to date with news and what's happening in the world. But LinkedIn is primarily where I'm at.
It's CARI Gold on LinkedIn. That's where we can find you. Cari, thank you so much for sharing so many insights for our audience today. We appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a lot of fun.